Truistory Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot. Today, Truistory Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Savannah was warm that spring, warmer than usual, the kind of warmth that clung to your skin, whispered through the Spanish moss, and made time move slower than it should. Elowen Duval stood barefoot on the porch of her pale blue Victorian home, watching the wind stir the petals of the azaleas. Her hands were wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that read, "You are exactly where you need to be." She hated that mug. It was a gift from Cashin. And for a long time, she believed it. Her life, on paper, looked idyllic. 31. A former interior designer turned full-time mom. Married to Cashin Ward, 35, architectural wunderkind. Charming enough to make boardroom deals feel like poetry. They had a 5-year-old son named Milo who smelled like honey and talked like a philosopher. They lived in a neighborhood where mailmen still waved and baristas remembered your drink order. They had it all, or at least they made sure everyone thought they did. Cashin was good at that. His smiles were curated, precise. The kind of man who made eye contact with waiters, held open doors, remembered birthdays. People loved him. So did Elowen. Or maybe she loved the version of him she thought she married. They had met at university in Chapel Hill. Both bright-eyed, broke, full of dreams. She remembered the way Cashin looked at blueprints like they were magic scrolls, and the way he listened to her color palettes like they were philosophy. Their connection was electric. He used to write her notes on napkins, build her surprise bookshelves out of scrap wood. They used to stay up until 3 a.m. planning the life they wanted, a little house with ivy on the porch, a golden retriever named Amos, and 2 children who would grow up reading Vonnegut and eating pancakes for dinner. And for a while they got close. After Milo was born, Elowen pressed pause on her career. Cashin's job at a high-end Atlanta firm paid well enough. And truthfully, she didn't mind. She loved the quiet rhythms of motherhood, the scent of baby powder and warm cinnamon toast, the softness of mid-morning naps curled on the couch. But time passed. Things shifted. Subtly at first, Cashin became more distracted, absent. He started working late, a phrase Elowen used to believe without question. But lately, he worked late nearly every night. He came home smelling faintly of bourbon she didn't keep in the house. She asked him about it once. He smiled and said, "The client insisted. You know how that goes." She didn't. Not really. Still, she smiled. She always did. She baked muffins. She wore the perfume he liked. She even signed them up for a weekend getaway in Asheville, something to reconnect. Cashin canceled last minute. "An urgent design review," he said. "Next month. I promise." Elowen didn't push. She told herself this was marriage. People drift. People circle back. She just had to hold on. Then, on a Thursday afternoon in March, her phone buzzed. "Sabine Mireille is calling." Elowen nearly dropped the glass she was rinsing. Sabine. Her best friend from college. Her soul twin, her partner in crime, her Paris pen pal. They had been inseparable once, until life and geography got in the way. Sabine had moved to Europe after graduation, chasing fashion shows and French lovers. Elowen stayed in the South, chasing quiet. "Sabby," she breathed, hitting answer. "Elle." Sabine's voice came through the line like smoke and laughter. "I'm back. For good. Please tell me you still make lemon scones and love trashy romance novels." Elowen laughed for the first time in weeks. They met for brunch at a garden cafe downtown. Sabine wore red lipstick and a white linen jumpsuit, effortlessly chic. She looked like a woman who had lived a dozen lives. She hugged Elowen tight, ordered champagne before noon, and told stories that made the waitstaff eavesdrop. Elowen felt 17 again. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. Elowen confessed how hard motherhood could be, how her art felt distant, how Cashin was busy. Sabine didn't pry, just sipped her mimosa and said, "Marriage is like silk. Beautiful, but delicate." By the time they said goodbye, Elowen had tears in her eyes. "I've missed you." "I've missed us," Sabine replied, eyes glinting behind her oversized sunglasses. "Let's not lose it again." They didn't. At least, not immediately. Sabine became a fixture. She came by often, at first invited, then simply appearing. Sometimes with croissants. Sometimes with books. Sometimes with accidental glimpses of her bare shoulders when Cashin happened to be in the room. Elowen noticed, but she didn't react. Not at first. She didn't react when Milo said, "Daddy smiles more when Miss Sabine is here." She didn't react when Cashin suddenly started quoting French poets. She didn't even react when Sabine once answered the door in Elowen's cardigan. Because that's what women like Elowen were taught to do, to be composed, to be graceful, to never be that wife. But things don't stay subtle forever. One night, Elowen was folding laundry in the bedroom while Cashin showered. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once. Twice. She didn't mean to look, but she did. Message from S. "Wish it were your hands on me. I'm still wearing your cologne. Miss you like fire." Elowen stood frozen. The walls didn't crumble. The world didn't tilt. She didn't scream. Instead, she carefully folded the shirt in her hands, placed it in the drawer, and walked outside. It was drizzling. Georgia spring rain, soft, persistent. She stood in the middle of the garden Cashin had promised to help plant and never did. The roses were overgrown. The lavender was dying. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay in bed beside him, listening to his breath. Cashin had never snored. Even now, betrayal curled beside her in absolute silence. At dawn, she rose, made breakfast, braided Milo's hair. He liked it long. Packed his lunch, kissed his forehead. Then she took out her old design notebooks from the attic and flipped to the last page. The sketch she found was titled "What Freedom Might Look Like." She smiled. She made tea. And she made a plan. It's remarkable how life can keep looking the same while everything inside it is quietly falling apart. From the outside, the Duval Ward household still ticked all the boxes. Milo laughed in the yard with a soccer ball, Elowen waved at the mailman, and Cashin kissed her cheek before work. But inside, something had fractured. It hadn't shattered yet, but it had cracked right down the middle, and Elowen could feel the pressure of the weight behind it. She didn't confront Cashin immediately. She watched. She listened. She waited. It was the same strategy she used when dealing with wallpaper seams that curled. Don't rip it off in anger. Steam it. Soften the glue. Let the truth peel itself away. Sabine kept showing up. Sometimes with candles that smelled like Paris, sometimes with advice Elowen never asked for. "You should wear your hair down more. It frames your face better." Or, "You should start a Pinterest page for your old designs. People love that rustic thing now." Elowen would smile politely and nod. But inside, she was counting. Counting how many times Sabine touched Cashin's arm at dinner. Counting how many times Cashin looked away when Elowen entered the room. Counting how often Sabine used the word "we" when referring to Cashin's projects. She was collecting data the way a scientist logs storm patterns. No emotion, just evidence. One afternoon, Elowen drove Milo to his music class early and returned home quietly. The house was still. Too still. Cashin wasn't supposed to be home until 6, but his car was in the driveway. The moment she opened the front door, she knew. There was laughter upstairs. 2 voices. A rustle of movement. Then silence. Elowen didn't climb the stairs. She didn't need to. She walked back to her car, drove to the closest gas station, and sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes without touching the steering wheel. That night, she asked Cashin how his day had gone. He lied. Smoothly, effortlessly. She smiled. The next morning, she contacted a friend from her past life, a tech-savvy friend who owed her a favor. Discreet. Legal. Enough to verify what she already knew. She received a file by the end of the week. Dates. Times. Hotel bookings. Call logs. Screenshots. One stood out. A booking under Cashin's name at a boutique hotel just outside the city. 2 guests. 1 room. The day of Milo's first school play. The one Cashin claimed he missed because of a client dinner in Macon. That night, Elowen tucked Milo in and went outside barefoot into the garden. She stood under the crepe myrtle, now heavy with bloom, and let the petals fall around her like quiet confetti. She cried, not because she didn't see it coming, but because she had hoped, foolishly, that she was wrong. The next day, she started preparing. Not a meltdown. Not revenge. A strategy. She began to withdraw in small, measured steps. Cooked less. Spoke less. Didn't initiate affection. She stopped asking about his day, stopped waiting for his car to pull into the driveway. She started reading in bed again. Books about women who ran away and never looked back. Cashin didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did, and pretended not to. He was out more. Working late. Weekend trips for project reviews. Sabine became less subtle. She started wearing Cashin's hoodie, left it hanging on the coat rack, claimed she was borrowing it because the breeze was chilly. Elowen watched her, observed the calculated chaos Sabine planted, lipstick on coffee mugs, perfume that clung to the curtains. She was marking territory. Cashin didn't say a word about it. One evening, Elowen sat across from her husband at dinner and asked, "Do you still love me?" He blinked, fork halfway to his mouth. "What kind of question is that?" She tilted her head. "A direct one." "Of course I do," he replied. "Why would you even ask that?" "No reason," she said, and smiled so gently it made him look uncomfortable. That night, she slept facing the window. His hand never reached for hers. She began gathering copies of important documents, marriage certificate, Milo's birth certificate, tax records. The deed to the house, only in Cashin's name. She trusted him completely then. She saved everything on a private cloud drive. She even created a second email, just for her exit plan. She wasn't angry anymore. She was ready. Then came the final push. Sabine showed up one Sunday morning, unannounced as always, wearing a white dress that barely qualified as decent. Elowen opened the door, Milo peeking from behind her legs. "Sorry," Sabine chirped, "not sorry at all. I thought Cashin said we were all having brunch?" Elowen smiled. He didn't mention it. Sabine walked in anyway. They sat on the patio. Milo played with his Legos on the porch swing. Cashin poured orange juice and tried to act normal. Sabine sat far too close to him, her hand grazing his thigh under the table. That was when Elowen stood. "I'm heading to the store," she said. "We're out of eggs." Cashin looked up. "You want me to go?" "No," she said, looking straight at Sabine. "You stay. I'm sure you two have plenty to talk about." Sabine's smile twitched. In the car, Elowen didn't go to the store. She drove to her sister's house an hour away, stayed for the afternoon, let Milo play with his cousins and spoke to her sister in the backyard about what-ifs and maybes and how to end a marriage without destroying a child. Her sister listened, didn't judge, only asked, "Do you want to stay or do you want to survive?" Elowen answered without thinking, "Survive." A week later, she served Cashin dinner like nothing was wrong. She wore the red lipstick Sabine once said was too bold for your energy. She made duck confit, Cashin's favorite, and poured an expensive wine. Cashin raised a brow. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," Elowen said. "Just felt like treating my husband." He smiled, charmed, flattered. He never noticed the envelope tucked in the bookshelf by the door, labeled in simple handwriting. "To be opened when you're ready to tell the truth." Inside, the screenshots, the receipts, the letter from Elowen's attorney. She didn't wait for him to find it. She took Milo to her sister's the next day. She left a note on the fridge. "This house was built on love. You let termites into the foundation. I'm not here to clean up the rubble. Take care of the garden or don't. Either way, I'm gone." That night, Cashin called 6 times. She didn't pick up. Sabine called twice. Elowen blocked her. The following morning, Elowen sat at her sister's kitchen table with a warm cup of tea and the soft sound of children playing outside. She looked at the sun filtering through the window and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Clarity. There was pain, yes, but also peace. She wasn't a victim. She was just finally done being quiet. Cashin found the envelope 3 days after Elowen left. It sat wedged between 2 cookbooks, just as she'd left it, labeled in her familiar, elegant handwriting. For a brief second he smiled, thinking it was a love letter. Maybe a gentle reminder that she still cared. Maybe she'd just needed space. Maybe. Then he opened it. What stared back at him were copies of hotel receipts, screenshots of explicit messages, and a letter from an attorney that began with, "Dear Mr. Ward, this is a formal notice of intent to dissolve your marriage." He read it twice. By the 3rd time, the air had changed. His hands trembled. His breath caught. He looked around their house, no, her house, though it was in his name, and suddenly everything looked staged, like a set that had been abandoned mid-scene. Her mug was still in the sink. A sweater still hung from the back of a chair. Milo's favorite book sat on the ottoman, open to a page about pirate treasure. He realized, with a pang that punched through his chest like a steel-toed boot, that she hadn't forgotten anything. She'd just taken everything that mattered. That night, Cashin drank whiskey straight from the bottle. He called Elowen voicemail. He called her sister, blocked. He tried texting her mother, her best friend from high school. Even the mailman. Silence. The world, it seemed, was suddenly very cold. Even Sabine's warmth felt different now. She came by that evening, wearing silk and a smug grin. She smelled like expensive perfume and expectation. "I told you she'd find out eventually," she said, reclining on their couch like it belonged to her. "Women always do." Cashin didn't respond. He was staring at the kitchen sink, watching water drip slowly from a faucet that hadn't been fixed. "She left," he muttered. "Well, she ran," Sabine corrected, swirling wine in his glass. "Not that I blame her. I mean, I would have left too, if I were her." He looked at her then. Really looked. Sabine, always polished, always seductive, suddenly looked like an echo. A woman who had built her identity in the shadows of other people's husbands. A collector of chaos. A tourist in stability. "I need to think," Cashin said. "About what?" she asked, pouting slightly. "We're free now. No more secrets." But Cashin wasn't thinking about freedom. He was thinking about Elowen's silence. About the way she had walked away without breaking a single plate. The press got wind of the separation 2 weeks later. Someone leaked the divorce notice, probably one of Sabine's friends. Cashin's firm panicked. The emails. The affair. The whispers that their star architect had gotten caught sleeping with a woman who was known for sleeping with everyone else's husbands. Clients began withdrawing. One of his largest projects, a new EcoArts campus downtown, was quietly handed to a competitor. Cashin was placed on extended leave. He called Elowen again. Voicemail. He left a message this time. "I know you hate me. I deserve that. But I need to see Milo. Please. I'm not asking for you. Just let me be his dad. I miss him." He never got a reply. Meanwhile, Elowen had found refuge. She'd rented a small, sunlit cottage 2 hours away, near the coast. It was nothing like the home she left behind, smaller, older, with floors that creaked and cabinets that stuck. But it was hers. She painted the walls herself, taught Milo how to grow herbs in a garden box. She used her savings to launch a small design business again, modest at first, but authentic. Word of mouth spread. Locals loved her taste. She became that designer with the soulful eyes. At night, she journaled. She wrote letters to the version of herself that stayed too long. She wrote one line over and over again. "You are not the wreckage. You are what rises from it." One morning, Milo found a photo of his father in a shoebox. "Do we hate him?" he asked, eyes wide. Elowen kneeled beside him. "No," she said softly. "We just don't live with him anymore." "Why?" She took a breath. Because sometimes love doesn't mean forever. Sometimes it means letting go before it breaks you. Milo nodded. I still want to see him. She bit her lip. I know. That night, she called her lawyer. Cashin was granted supervised visitation for the time being. The first meeting was at a children's play center, neutral ground. Elowen didn't go in. She sat in the parking lot, heart pounding, watching. Cashin walked out holding Milo's hand like he was touching glass. Fragile. Precious.
Guilty.
Milo ran back to Elowen's car, smiling. He brought me Legos. Cashin followed behind, unsure if he should approach.
He did.
I didn't expect you to come, he said. Elowen looked up at him from the driver's seat. Sunglasses, shielding her expression. I didn't come for you, she said. I came to make sure he's safe. A pause. Don't, she cut him off. Whatever apology you've practiced in your head, I don't need it. He exhaled. You look different. Peace does that, she replied, putting the car in drive. Don't be late next time. And with that, she pulled away. Sabine's spiral began not long after. With Cashin distancing himself and no public commitment from him, she started drinking more, appearing at events alone, dropping passive-aggressive comments online. Then came the reveal: she was pregnant. Cashin didn't believe it. He demanded proof. DNA. Sabine screamed at him in the parking lot of his office, the last office appearance he'd ever make before being forced to resign quietly. He never got the test. Sabine disappeared a month later, ran off to LA, according to gossip. Or Italy. No one really knew. No one really cared anymore. She became another headline that faded too fast. Cashin hit rock bottom 6 months after Elowen left. He lived alone in a one-bedroom condo with bad lighting and worse plumbing. He drank too much, slept too little, and walked through each day like he was underwater. He thought often about the garden Elowen had once begged him to plant. How he'd shrugged it off. Said they'd do it next spring.
Now.
Spring had come, and he had no garden, no house, no wife, no family, only himself, and the deafening echo of what he threw away. Elowen, on the other hand, was blooming. Her business had taken off. She'd partnered with a local artist to launch a sustainable design boutique. She taught weekend workshops on color theory and space therapy. She wrote essays that got picked up by wellness magazines. And slowly, people began calling her by a new name: Resilient. One evening, she stood in her small kitchen stirring soup while Milo painted on the floor. He looked up and said, "You're happy again." She turned. "What makes you say that? You don't cry in the bathtub anymore." She froze. "I used to hear you," he added gently, "but now you laugh more." She crouched, pulled him close, and held him. That night, she wrote one final letter. Not to Cashin. To herself. "You made it. Through fire, through silence, through the slow, cruel unraveling. You made it to the other side. And you are still soft, still kind, still enough, and always free." Elowen no longer woke up afraid. That used to be the hardest part, the mornings. Waking to the dull ache of a cold bed, to the silence of a house stripped of trust, to the kind of grief that didn't scream, but pressed down like fog. But not anymore. These days, Elowen woke up to birdsong, to Milo's sleepy feet pattering down the hallway, to the soft rustle of leaves outside her cottage window and the smell of basil growing on the sill. She no longer needed Cashin's approval, or Sabine's friendship, or the version of herself who clung to both like lifelines. Because broken women don't beg, they build. It had been a year since she left the life that nearly consumed her. A year since the lies were laid bare, since she stopped wearing forgiveness like a mask. Her design business, once a whispered hope, now stood proudly on Main Street, nest and vine. The windows were lined with handmade pieces, the kind of items that made you stop, breathe, and feel again. People came from all over the county, to shop, to consult, to simply sit with Elowen and talk about their spaces and, somehow, about their lives. They told her secrets while she chose fabrics. She listened. She always listened. because she understood what it was like to live in a house that looked perfect from the outside and felt like quicksand inside. Cashin tried, for a time, to repair his image. After stepping down from his firm, he launched a small private practice. A few loyal clients stuck around, but the name Ward no longer held the weight it once did. He dated casually, women who resembled Sabine, then women who didn't. But no one stayed. Perhaps they sensed the hollowness. The way he looked over their shoulders when they laughed, as if searching for a laugh that belonged to someone else. He visited Milo every other weekend. Never late. Always with a gift. Elowen allowed it. Not for Cashin, for Milo. But she never invited him inside. The boundaries were clear. One weekend in March, Cashin lingered at the door a little too long after dropping Milo off. He said, eyes soft. Do you ever think about us? She didn't even blink.
No.
I do, he said. I think about what we had, what we lost. She nodded slowly. I think about what I found. After you. A pause. Do you hate me? He asked. No, she said truthfully. I just don't need to love you anymore. He tried to smile.
Failed.
I miss you. I know, she replied, and closed the door. Sabine resurfaced that spring. Not in town, but online. A carefully filtered post on Instagram, her holding a toddler, smiling on a beach in Portugal. Some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. No mention of Cashin. No mention of Elowen. But the caption read like a confession. Or a challenge. Elowen stared at the screen for a moment before tossing her phone on the table and going back to painting the porch swing with Milo. She didn't care where Sabine was. She only cared that she wasn't here. That was enough. People in town often asked her why she stayed. Why not move away? Start fresh, they'd say. But Elowen didn't want to erase her past. She wanted to root it, grow through it. This was the soil where her worst days happened and where her best days were beginning. The community adored her. Children brought her wildflowers. Old men stopped by with coffee. Local women came just to talk, about husbands, about self-worth, about the unspoken ache of starting over at 30-something. She never offered advice. She only shared this. You don't have to burn the house down. You can just walk out and close the door behind you. On her 33rd birthday, her sister surprised her with a trip to Charleston. It had been years since Elowen let herself be the one taken care of. She wore a sundress. She danced barefoot on the beach with Milo. She drank wine on a balcony and watched the world shimmer. And that's where she met Alec. Not in a romantic, fireworks kind of way. In a quiet, steady way. He was a widowed father of 2. Ran a small bookstore. Carried grief in his eyes like she carried grace in hers. He made bad coffee but brilliant jokes. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. They talked until midnight. About life. About rebuilding. About how you never really start over. You just start again. She didn't give him her number. He found her through the shop. 2 weeks later, he sent her a box of books with a note. I'd like to know your chapters if you'll let me. She smiled, but didn't rush. She wasn't looking to be rescued. Just understood. Cashin heard about Alec from Milo first. Mom has a friend, he said, spooning cereal into his mouth. Cashin felt something twist in his chest. Does she? He asked. Milo nodded. He brings her sunflowers. Not roses. She says roses are for people who waited too long to say sorry. Cashin finished his coffee in silence. He didn't ask any more questions. He already knew the answers. One rainy afternoon, Elowen got a call from Cashin. She let it go to voicemail. But later, she listened. I signed the final papers. Transferred the house deed. You'll get the updated docs soon. I just wanted to say thank you. For not destroying me when you could have. For protecting Milo. For letting me be in his life. You're stronger than I ever deserved. I hope you find someone who sees that from the start. She didn't cry. But she did stare out at the garden for a long time after. The lavender was blooming again. Milo's school hosted a Mothers and Mentors tea party that May. Each child was asked to write a card for the woman they admired most. Elowen found hers tucked under her teacup. It read, "My mom is the bravest person I know. She never gives up. She makes our house feel like a hug. She's not afraid to start over. And she always smells like cookies and rain." She laughed, then cried. But not the kind of tears that hurt. The kind that water the soul. That night, she and Milo baked cupcakes and danced in the kitchen. Music loud, feet bare, laughs echoing off the walls like magic spells. Alex stopped by to return a borrowed novel. He didn't knock, he learned not to interrupt joy. He waited, smiling, until the song ended. Elowen answered the door, with flour on her cheek. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she replied, breathless. He looked past her, into the light-filled kitchen, and said softly, "That's what home sounds like." And for the first time in years, she let herself believe it. It was on a Wednesday that the past returned, in a beige envelope. Elowen had just returned from the farmer's market, arms full of fresh basil and artichokes, when she noticed it wedged between the layers of a local magazine on her doorstep. No return address.
No handwriting.
Just her name, typed in bold. Elowen Duval. She didn't open it immediately. She brewed tea, fed the cat, changed out of her rain-splattered dress. Only then, in the quiet of her small sunroom, did she slit the envelope open with a letter opener Alec had carved for her last Christmas. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. She unfolded it slowly. "Dear Elowen, I know I have no right to write to you, but I couldn't live with not trying. I'm in Savannah. I've come back. Not for Cashin. Not for the life I tried to steal. For the child. For the truth. Please. 1 hour. 1 coffee. 1 chance to say it face to face. I'm staying at the Delphine Inn. Room 203. Sabine." Elowen sat very still. It had been 2 years since she'd last seen that name outside her nightmares. She didn't tell Alec right away. Or her sister. Or anyone. Instead, she took 3 long walks. Cleaned the entire house. Even the baseboards. Then she sat with herself in the mirror and asked the question she hadn't asked in a long time. "What do you want, Elowen?" Her answer came not as a sentence but as a sensation. She didn't want revenge. She didn't want closure. She wanted truth, not to receive it, but to own it. To look the woman who shattered her in the face and say, "You didn't win." She went to the Delphine Inn on a Thursday morning.
No makeup. No armor.
Just Elowen, calm, clear-eyed, dressed in soft gray linen and truth. The concierge didn't bat an eye. Just pointed her to the second floor. Room 203. She knocked once. Sabine opened the door almost immediately, as if she'd been standing there waiting. She looked different. Thinner. Paler. Hair clipped short and practical. She wore no jewelry.
No perfume. No seduction.
Only fatigue. "Elle," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Elowen said nothing. Sabine stepped aside.
Come in.
The room smelled of chamomile and old wallpaper. There were toys in the corner. A small suitcase. A stroller folded neatly by the window. And a child. A little girl, maybe 2 years old, sat on the bed eating crackers, her curly hair pulled into uneven puffs. She looked up, made eye contact with Elowen, and smiled, a crooked, familiar smile. Elowen's breath hitched. Sabine followed her gaze. "Her name is Wren." Elowen nodded once. "She's Cashin's?" she asked, even though the answer bloomed in her gut like thunder. "Sabine Saturday, yes. I didn't know for sure. I thought she might be someone else's. But the test confirmed it." Elowen didn't move. "And now what?" "I don't want anything from you," Sabine said quickly. "Not money. Not forgiveness. I needed you to see her. To know she exists. That something real came from something ugly." Elowen walked to the window. The garden below was blooming, roses, of course. "How long are you staying?" Sabine hesitated. "I don't know. I don't have a plan. Just instincts. I'm not good with plans." "That's true," Elowen said, with an edge that wasn't cruel, just final. They sat in silence. Then Sabine whispered, "I never loved him, you know." Elowen turned. You didn't have to. You just had to enjoy taking what wasn't yours. Sabine looked down. I thought if I took what you had, I'd finally feel full. But it just made me hollow. Because it wasn't yours, Elowen said. It never was. Another silence. Ren giggled at a cartoon playing on a tablet. Elowen watched her for a long time. That laugh. That nose. Cashin's entire soul wrapped in miniature. She closed her eyes. I'm not angry anymore.
Sabine, she said.
But I'll never forget what you did. I don't expect you to. I hope Ren grows up better than both of you. Sabine nodded. And then quietly, gently, Elowen walked out. She didn't cry on the way home. Didn't scream. Didn't slam the car door. She picked Milo up from art class, bought him a strawberry smoothie, and drove home listening to an audiobook about volcanoes. When Milo went to bed, she called Cashin. He answered on the second ring. Elowen, you have a daughter. A pause. Sharp intake of breath. I know, he whispered. Sabine told me a week ago. She said she reached out to you. She did. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know for sure. And by the time I found out, I didn't know what to do. Elowen's voice was steady. Then start by doing right by her. I will. She nodded, even though he couldn't see it. I'm not calling to open any doors, she added. Just tying up loose threads. I understand. And with that, she ended the call. That weekend, she told Alec everything. Over pancakes and pressed coffee, she laid it all out, the letter, the meeting, the child, the look on Sabine's face. He listened without interruption. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. You don't owe me an explanation, he said. But I'm proud of you for walking through the fire. She laughed softly. I thought the fire was over. He shook his head. It never ends. But you've learned to dance in it. On the 1-year anniversary of her business, Elowen hosted a small celebration. The entire town showed up, families, friends, curious strangers. There were cupcakes, lanterns, and a wall where people could write a note to the version of themselves who never gave up. Elowen watched as women of all ages pinned messages to that wall. You're stronger than you think. He left, and I'm still standing. You didn't deserve the silence. You deserved the truth. She became her own rescue. She added one of her own. You loved. You lost. You lived. That night, she stood outside on the porch, barefoot, a glass of wine in her hand. Milo was asleep. Alec was upstairs reading. The wind rustled through the vines growing along the side of the house. Elowen closed her eyes. She no longer saw betrayal when she blinked. She saw possibility.
Peace. Power.
A different kind of beauty. The kind that grows wild, untamed, but never forgotten. Elowen no longer measured her days by what had been lost. She measured them by what she was learning to love again. The smell of early morning rain hitting hot pavement. The rustle of Milo's drawings taped to the fridge with mismatched magnets. The way Alec read poetry aloud, never for performance, just to share breath. The silence that used to feel suffocating, now a sanctuary. A full year had passed since she last looked at her old life and wished for it back. That thought no longer lived inside her. Not even in the darkest corners. She was no longer surviving. She was building. It started with small shifts, new furniture, different routines, saying yes to herself before anyone else. But something deeper had been awakening inside her. She wanted to give more. Not to Cashin. Not to Sabine. Not even to Alec, though his love felt more like a harbor than a storm. She wanted to give back to the women who had sat across from her shop counter, eyes tired, voices unsure, asking quietly, how did you do it? How did you leave? How did you start again? At first, Elowen didn't have an answer, but eventually she did. You don't start again, she would say. You begin differently. That fall, she launched a project that had lived in her mind for months, a nonprofit called Second Bloom. It offered free home redesigns and consultations to women leaving domestic situations, shelters, divorces, transitional housing. The goal was simple: Give them a space that reflected who they were becoming, not who they had been with. The first client was a young mother named Kaya. 2 kids. No support. A 1-bedroom apartment with beige walls and folding chairs for furniture. Kaya's voice cracked when she said, "I've never had curtains before." So Elowen brought in fabric, texture, color. She hung soft lights, added plants. She let Kaya's children pick the color for the rug, teal, bright like hope. When they finished, Kaya stood in the doorway, trembling. "It looks like someone lives here," she whispered. "Someone real." "You do," Elowen said. "You live here. And you're more than real." The work fueled her. It didn't drain her the way her marriage once had. It gave back. Every client, every woman who cried over a hand-sewn pillow or a thrifted bookshelf restored with care, they built Elowen right alongside themselves. Alex supported her every step, quietly, without need for credit. When she came home late, hands covered in paint and dust, he didn't ask why dinner wasn't made. He handed her a warm cloth and said, "Tell me everything." Sometimes they'd fall asleep on the couch, mid-conversation. Love, this time, wasn't a rescue.
It was a partnership.
One crisp Sunday morning in October, Cashin showed up unannounced. Elowen was raking leaves in the front yard. Milo was away at a friend's birthday party. Alec was out hiking with his daughters. She almost didn't recognize Cashin at first. He looked smaller, thinner, hair a bit grayer, eyes less sharp.
"Hi," he said.
She wiped sweat from her brow. "You know you need to call first." "I know," he replied. "This wasn't planned. I was driving by." I've been thinking about Ren." Elowen sighed. "How is she?" "She's good. Sabine's living in Asheville now. Working part-time, taking classes. We share custody. It's civil." She nodded, unsure what else to say. Then he said it.
"I'm sorry."
"For everything. I don't want anything from you. I just needed to say that." Elowen leaned on her rake. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "But that doesn't mean you're welcome here. Not like before." "I understand. I hope you're doing the work." "I am," he said. "Therapy. Parenting classes. Trying to be a man my daughter won't be ashamed of." She studied him. Maybe he was telling the truth. Maybe he wasn't. But either way, it wasn't her burden to carry. That evening, Alec came home to find Elowen curled up in the living room, watching an old film noir. He didn't ask about the rake leaning against the porch, or the subtle stiffness in her posture. He just poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one, and kissed her forehead. "You good?" he asked. "I'm getting better," she replied. And she meant it. By winter, Second Bloom had helped over 40 women. Some donated furniture. Others sent thank-you cards with trembling handwriting. One wrote, "You reminded me that I don't need permission to be whole." Elowen taped that one above her desk. Christmas came quietly. They didn't travel. They didn't host. They stayed home, baked cookies, wrapped presents in newspaper tied with string, and read The Little Prince aloud by the fire. It was the first Christmas Milo spent without Cashin. He didn't cry. He asked once, "Do you think he's sad?" Elowen answered gently, "Maybe. But we're allowed to be happy even when someone else isn't." Milo nodded. "Good. Because I am." She tucked him in with tears in her eyes. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. On New Year's Eve, Alex surprised her. They stood outside watching fireworks in the distance when he handed her a small, unassuming box. Inside was a ring. Simple. Silver. A tiny engraved vine along the band. No diamond. Just a question. Not a proposal. A choice. This doesn't mean tomorrow. Or next month. It just means if and when you want to wear it. Elowen closed the box, held it to her heart, and whispered, "Yes. Someday." He smiled. "Then someday it is." Spring came early. The lavender bloomed. The garden she once begged Cashin to build had now flourished under her hands. Tomatoes, daisies, lemon balm, hope. People stopped by not just for business but for stories. For peace. for the quiet strength they felt near her. She was no longer the woman who needed saving. She had become the kind of woman who made others feel saved without ever trying. One afternoon, she walked past her old house. A for sale sign stood on the lawn. The garden was gone. The windows dull. The paint chipping. She didn't feel sorrow. Only clarity. Some homes weren't lost. They were released. She whispered a soft goodbye and kept walking. Elowen stood by the sea that evening. Alone. She thought about the girl she used to be. The one who waited in kitchens for apologies that never came. The one who smiled through betrayal. Who whispered forgiveness into the night just to hear something kind. That girl had not been weak. She had been brave, just in the wrong direction. Now Elowen was brave inward. Brave in the way she loved. Brave in the way she said no without explaining. Brave enough to begin again. The day Elowen realized she had fully healed, it wasn't because of any grand event.
No dramatic gesture.
No sweeping speech.
No cinematic moment. It was a Tuesday.
She spilled coffee on her new linen blouse, looked down at the spreading stain, and laughed. Not because the shirt was cheap, it wasn't. Not because she didn't care, she did. But because, for the first time in her life, a small mess didn't feel like the beginning of a spiral. It just felt like life. She cleaned it up, changed her blouse,
Moved on.
and that's when it hit her. Healing isn't fireworks. It's the sound of your own laugh, echoing through a quiet kitchen and knowing it's real. Spring melted into early summer. Second bloom flourished. Milo finished 4th grade with a science medal and a love letter from a girl named Casey that smelled like grape bubblegum. Alec's daughters began calling Elowen bonus mom. And the garden behind Elowen's house grew out of control in the most beautiful way, wild and free, like it was no longer afraid of being seen. Neither was she. But love, even when tender, still asks for courage. Alec never pressured her. But she could feel the question he hadn't asked again. The one sitting softly in the drawer next to her bed, that little ring with the carved vine, waiting like a whisper. One night, she opened the drawer, held the ring in her palm, and stared at it under lamplight. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply whispered to herself, "You're not saying yes to being someone's again. You're saying yes to being loved, without disappearing." And in that moment she smiled. It was time. Elowen didn't plan anything dramatic. There was no elaborate dinner, no crowd, no flowers. Just a picnic blanket under the willow tree in their backyard. She packed his favorite grilled cheese with tomato jam, 2 ciders, a slice of lemon pie. When Alec arrived, sweaty from fixing the screen door, she handed him a cold towel, kissed his cheek, and said, "Come sit with me." They sat under the willow, watching the fireflies blink on like tiny lanterns in the dusk. Alec took a bite of the sandwich and groaned, "God, I love you." Elowen laughed. "You love the sandwich." "That too." She reached into her pocket, held out the box. His face froze. She opened it slowly and said, simply, "Someday is today." He blinked. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm not saying yes to safety, or to escaping loneliness, or to fixing each other. I'm saying yes to you, because with you, I've never had to abandon myself." His eyes welled up. "Then this is the softest yes I've ever heard." And just like that, their world shifted. Not exploded, not transformed, just shifted gently, perfectly into place. They didn't rush. They didn't send invitations. Or hire planners. They eloped on the edge of autumn, under the cypress trees near a lake, wearing boots and hand-knit sweaters. Milo was their ring-bearer. Alec's daughters read a poem. Elowen wore a crown of baby's breath and wild rosemary. She walked down the path alone, not because she had no one, but because she had become her own beginning. The vows were simple. Alec promised to never dim her light. Elowen promised to keep laughing, even when the coffee spilled. They sealed it with a kiss that felt like breathing. Not a fairy tale. Not a fireworks finale. Just love, soft and grounded and steady. Back home, Elowen didn't change her last name. She didn't feel the need to, but she changed her email signature. Elowen Duval, founder, Second Bloom.
Wife.
Mother, builder of quiet joy. Cashin didn't attend the wedding. He sent a brief email the day after. I heard. I hope it's a beautiful life. Tell Milo I'm proud of him. She didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. And that was its own kind of peace. That winter, Second Bloom received its first national press mention. A small article in an online lifestyle magazine featured before and after photos of 3 women's homes, along with quotes from Elowen about dignity, healing, and the importance of curtains. Requests began pouring in. Elowen hired 2 women she'd helped through the program to join the team full-time. The community grew. So did the impact.
So did she.
On the first anniversary of their wedding, Alex surprised her with a small notebook titled, Things I Love About Watching You Love Yourself. Each page had a short entry. When you sing to the basil plant. When you wear red lipstick for no reason. When you ask for help and mean it. When you say no like it's a full sentence. When you let our daughter braid your hair, even when it makes you look like a backup dancer from a 90s girl group. She cried reading it, then laughed at the last page. When you forgive yourself. And again. And again. On the final page, he'd written, I didn't fall in love with a woman who needed saving. I fell in love with a woman who finally chose herself. That night, she stood by the mirror in their room, brushing her hair. For a long time, she'd avoided mirrors. Not because she thought she wasn't beautiful, but because she was afraid of who would look back, the tired version, the broken version, the woman shaped by disappointment. Now, when she looked, she saw something else. Not perfection, not youth, but power.
Soft.
Unapologetic.
Whole.
She didn't need the old version of her life back. She didn't need the what-ifs or the vindication. What she had was more than enough. A partner who stayed without demanding pieces of her. A son who grew up watching resilience, not resentment. A purpose that bloomed from ashes. And a heart that no longer asked for permission. Because sometimes, the loudest triumph is the softest yes. And Elowen had finally said it to herself. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.